fix people. You can't be fixed. Go away.
So for today's lesson, you will be mostly on your back. Depending on how the time goes, there might be a time where I will invite a few of you to roll onto your stomachs, but again, only if that's easy and comfortable for you to continue the thread of the lesson. How many of you here absolutely know you're not going to roll onto your stomach if I recommend it later in the lesson? Okay, so please lie on your backs and just begin noticing. Noticing what? Noticing what you notice. Do you notice your thoughts, wondering what you're supposed to be noticing? You recognize you're here to experience your body in new ways. So where does your attention go in your body as you lie here with the opportunity to notice your body? And bring your attention to the weight of the back of your head. And just feel the back of your head resting on your mat. And notice if your head is turned just a little to the right or to the left. Did you place your head in the most relaxed position? Not necessarily the most symmetrical position, but the most comfortable position, so that there's as little static of effort as possible as we continue our opportunity to notice. Notice the backs of each of your shoulder blades, the right shoulder blade and the left shoulder blade, and how they rest uniquely one from the other on the floor or on your mat. Notice the differences between the left shoulder blade and the right shoulder blade. Does one rest more heavily or more firmly? Is there more contact? Notice the backs of your ribs. So underneath your shoulder blades there are ribs, and below your shoulder blades, your spine and your ribs may be in more or less contact with the floor. And again, notice what you notice, the left side and the right side. How many ribs do you imagine there are resting on the floor from the point, the lowest point of your shoulder blade, down to where you can start to feel your lower back arching away from the floor? And notice the right side and the left side of your lower back arching away from the floor. The tone in the muscles, the amount of lift and lightness away from the floor. Or for some of you, the amount of strain, how the muscles are so used to working and holding your posture when you're sitting or standing that they haven't yet learned to let go and relax when you're just lying here. And then feel the weight of your pelvis. Your buttocks is just the muscles over the bones of your pelvis. And notice if your pelvis is tilted a little bit towards the right or the left, so that there might be a little more weight under the right side of the pelvis than the left side. You might feel it rotated upward, bringing your low back further away from the floor, or rotated. You might feel your pelvis rotated downward, flattening your lower back towards the floor. There's so much movement potential in the pelvis. 2 inches below your belly button and a few inches deep is your center of gravity. It is the core of strength that all the core strengthening programs allude to. It is where all of your movement can extend from. And as you're breathing, just allow this point in your belly to expand with the inhalation and relax with the exhalation. So you breathe in and you fill your lungs, but you actually imagine as though you're filling your lower abdomen. Your lower abdomen extends a little bit upward towards the ceiling with the inhalation and relaxes with the exhalation. And some of you have learned various abdominal breathing techniques in the past. So if you're familiar with this, relax into it. Don't make your abdomen extend out. If you're unfamiliar with this, you may feel your chest and your ribs lifting with the inhalation and have difficulty feeling the possibility of your lower abdomen extending with breath. So just notice that. And then please bend your knees up one at a time so that your feet are in a standing position on the floor. You may want to take your socks off if you notice a slipperiness. And very, very gently take your knees a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right. Only as far as you feel completely safe and the movement feels completely soft and effortless. And some of you who've experienced back pain may have been told not to rotate. If that brings fear or concern with this movement, you can make the movement a half an inch to the right and to the left, and imagine the rest of the movement influencing your pelvis, your spine, your shoulders. So taking them a little left and a little right, feel how the weight shifts across the soles of your feet. Inside of one foot, the outside of the other foot. Notice, do you keep most of your weight through the heels of your feet, or do you have more weight through the balls of your feet? And play with that a little bit. Let yourself experiment with the position of your feet, with putting more pressure through different parts of your feet. How does just subtle changes affect the movement and the sensations up through your knees, into your pelvis, and even into your low back? Notice if at any point you tend to hold your breath. For some of you, it's easy to take your knees far to the side. Can you just as easily and effortlessly draw them back up to the middle? Moshe Feldenkrais used to say that a good movement, a quality movement, is one that is just as effortless in coming back to neutral as in going to the end range of that movement. So there's no momentum, there's no stretch. The nervous system is completely involved in organizing and coordinating the muscles to guide the skeleton through the movements. And then notice also differences. When your knees go to one side, as far as you can comfortably, just kind of keep them there and notice the alignment of your knees to your pelvis, your ribs, your shoulders, your neck and your head. Just feel that position with your knees to that side, and maybe do that a couple times, bringing the knees up to the middle and back to that first same side that you were at. Really getting to know, how do I move my knees in this direction? Several times, feeling the weight shifting across the soles of your feet, Feeling how the weight shifts across the back of your pelvis. Feeling the influence of the rotation up your spine, across the back of your ribs into your shoulders. And when you've done it several times to that side, then consciously shift to the other side and feel, how do I go? How do I rotate my knees to this other side? And you might just pause there for a moment and feel this configuration, this unique configuration with your knees shifted to the other side, how your feet support you, what happens in your pelvis and your spine, your shoulders. And then go that way several times, really getting to know and appreciate how this way is different. How do we develop the curious observer, the one who is interested in the sensations, the one who is interested in the thoughts of the mind, but is not the thoughts and is not the sensations, but is the curious observer of those. And then compare the two sides again, going left and right, and really appreciating how different they truly are. How many different things can you find? Remember those childhood books? They fortunately often give them in restaurants, and the child has to find how many things are different about this picture than that picture. How many things are different about how you move your knees to one side and how that influences the whole of your body compared to how you move your knees and bring them to neutral on the other side. And when you've done that a few times and noticed your differences and found the 12 different things you should have found, just kidding, however many is fine, just let your legs down long again if that's comfortable for you and rest. Why do we rest in a Feldenkrais lesson? Are you tired? Are you breathing hard? Are you overstretched? Or is it unusual to bring your brain to this kind of self-attention? And where does the brain go? Sometimes the brain wants to put you to sleep because it doesn't want you to pay attention to something new. It's tiring, it's boring, it's not getting anything done, it's not satisfying your self-image. Sometimes it just floats and thinks. And with time it begins to notice, how do you feel different now, lying here, than when we started this lesson? So once again, please bend your knees up. Find a stable placement for your feet. And bring your ankles, your feet, and your knees together. So there's no space between your thighs, your knees, your feet. For some of you, there might still be a space between your lower legs. For some of us, there isn't. It just depends on your configuration. And now, this time, I want you to see if you can take your knees to the left side, but lock your feet together so that the knees are not going to slide, but your right foot is actually going to lift a little bit off the mat in order for your knees to tilt to the left and for your legs to stay glued together in this position. So you'll actually be tilting over the outer edge of your left foot. So there's a whole different configuration to take your knees to the left just the left, and back to the center, locking them together and actually sort of lifting a little bit and tilting that right foot over the left foot, tilting over the edge of the left foot. And feel how that's different in the pelvis. There's a different kind of organization that has to take place for this particular, what we call a constraint. And keep it gentle, even though you're maintaining this restraint. And as you tilt your knees to the side and you feel the particular rotation towards the left of your pelvis, see if you can begin to feel how the back of you, how your back peels off of the floor. So as your legs tilt to the left, you'll begin to feel the back side of your hip beginning to lift a little away from the floor. And it may not completely lose contact, but see if you can feel that first, right behind your pelvis and the back of your hip, you feel the skin parting from the floor. And then higher up on your pelvis, so that as your knees tilt to the left, you're feeling this peeling motion, as if the back of you is one of those stickers, and if you don't just peel it quite right, you'll get one of those annoying tears, and then you'll never get it off the package or the piece of furniture. So very thoughtfully, you're tilting your knees to the left, peeling the back of your hip, the back of your pelvis. And if you're able to, see if you can begin to feel the peeling away of the lower ribs on the right. So your knees tilt to the left, your pelvis tilts to the left, and the further you're able to go, the more you can feel each of the lower ribs, one at a time, peeling away from the floor. And then you place them back, one rib at a time, comes back to the floor, and you carefully place yourself back on to the mat. So that returning to neutral is just as intentional, just as thoughtful, so you don't get a wrinkle in that peel. Coming back is just as intentional as going to the left. And breathing. And if you're not able to take your knees very far, imagine just with that configuration of locking those knees together, what it's like to let them tilt to the left and feel the right side of your body, starting with your hip and pelvis, moving up your spine into the ribs, peeling away from the floor, and then placing them back, one rib at a time, the low back, the pelvis, and finally the back of the hip. Now, if by chance holding your knees together like this creates a certain kind of discomfort, what should you do? What is the cardinal rule of a Feldenkrais lesson? Never do anything that hurts or hurts more. The hurts more is for my clients who come and they are already in pain. So they just say, well, then I shouldn't do it. So we start at the baseline that you begin at. So if you want to experiment, if you need to experiment with this with your knees and feet in a more comfortable position, that's okay too. You just get less of a defined rotation in your pelvis, less of a clear peeling off of your pelvis and your ribs. And then what if a couple times as you tilt your legs to the left and peel your ribs off, you rolled your head to the right? So you're peeling the right side of your back off the floor and the left side of your head off your support, whether it's the floor, or a pillow, or a pad. And then you're very carefully placing them both back to the center and breathing, staying soft, staying effortless. And then just rest with your knees in the middle. And you can put your feet a little bit apart, comfortable position, legs in the middle. Put the palms of your hands together. And then raise your arms straight up towards the ceiling so that your elbows are reasonably straight. Again, if this is with the palms together, fingers touching. Again, if this is uncomfortable for some reason for your shoulders or your elbows, just modify. I've had people before just keep their elbows down at their side and just put the palms of their hands just right over their chest or their belly without their shoulders raised up. So modify if you need to, but if you don't need to, your hands, your fingers are now pointing towards the ceiling with your palms together, each finger touching the other finger. And see if you can take your palms to the right. So similar to the legs, you're not going to glide or slide your palms on each other. They're going to stay glued. Your elbows are going to stay straight. And you're basically rotating your shoulders to the right, orienting your whole upper trunk to the right. And again, feeling the back of your left shoulder blade peeling off the floor. The back of the ribs on the upper left side peeling off the floor as if you're peeling your shoulder blade and your ribs one at a time as your hands drop down to the right as far as is easy and comfortable. And then you're placing them back. Placing first the lowest rib that you got to, the next rib, the next, finally the lowest point on the shoulder blade, placing the shoulder blade back until you're resting in the middle. And what if as you did this to your comfort level, and again you might just imagine it if it's uncomfortable for your back or your shoulders in any way, but as you take your ribs to the right, let your head roll to the right also, but slide your eyes and your eyeball sockets to the left. So your hands are going to the right, your head is rolling to the right, but your eyes are gliding to the left. And let your knees stay relatively in the same position up towards the ceiling. And if you need to let them wobble a little to the right, you can. But again, you'll get more rotation in the upper trunk by keeping your knees pointed towards the ceiling. So hands going to the right, and you'll feel that it's as if that left arm has to lengthen away from the floor and begin to peel the shoulder blade, and each of the upper ribs away from the floor, placing them back down. Let your arms rest whenever they start to feel fatigue from this position. And next time you place your ribs, your shoulder blade, and your shoulder back on the floor, let your arms rest like your legs rest. Take a full rest. Resting the mind. Resting the nervous system. Resting the observer in training. Feel the differences between the right shoulder and the left shoulder. After this movement that focused just one directionally, and feel the difference between the back side of the pelvis on the right and left, the low back, how your ribs are resting on the floor on the right and left sides. And then again, bend your knees up. Place your knees, your ankles, your feet together. lock them in, and begin tilting your knees now to the right. And just start with a very small movement. Just check it out. What happens when you just initiate that movement of tilting the knees to the right? What begins to happen in the feet? How do you begin to figure out how you're going to tilt over the right foot, the outer edge of the right foot? How do you begin to figure out how that left foot is going to lift up off the floor, and with it, the left side of the pelvis? Eventually, the left side of the lower back. Each time you take your your knees to the right, go a little further, peeling just a little bit more off. And again, intentionally placing each portion of your low back, your pelvis, your hip, intentionally placing them back down in contact with the floor when your feet come back into full contact. Feel the configuration of the pelvis tilting, rotating to the right. If you're not able to move your knees far enough to actually feel the ribs lifting up off the left, feel how the weight lightens. There's less weight under the ribs. Feel the diagonal shift of where you feel support into the floor and what gets lighter. What gets heavier? And as your knees go to the right, glide your eyes to the left. And as your knees come up into the middle, bring your eyes back to the center. Breathing. Notice, when do you breathe? You always inhale every time your knees go down and exhale when you bring them back up, or maybe you exhale when you drop your knees to the right and inhale when you bring them back up. Now what if, next time you take your knees to the right, you let your head roll. Let's see, I take that back. Let your eyes go to the right, but let your head roll to the left. Now this starts to get into the walking and chewing gum category, so just notice that you're breathing. So your knees to the right, your eyes to the right, but your head rolls gently to the left. Gently. Have fun with this. There is no right or wrong, just an interest, just a curiosity of how do I organize my body to move in opposite directions than what some of your most fundamental developmental movement patterns require. Next time you bring your knees up, just keep them there. Place your feet a little bit apart. Place the palms of your hands together. Straighten your elbows out and reach your fingertips up towards the ceiling. And begin gently exploring taking your palms to the left. Starting with a very small movement. What's it going to be like the first time you feel the lengthening of the right arm? So that the right shoulder begins to lift away from the floor. And then the placing of the right shoulder back down to the floor. Notice, is your neck relaxed so that your head just automatically wants to roll to the left with you? Or is there an unconscious pattern of just holding your head right in the middle. See if you can soften that. Let it go. Let your head roll to follow your hands and arms and shoulders. Each time peeling a little more away from behind the shoulder, the upper part of the shoulder blade, the middle, and then lower part of the shoulder blade, until finally you're feeling some of those upper ribs peeling off the floor. And then you're imagining one at a time, as if you're counting them, placing them back down as you bring your hands over the center again. And did you notice anything the first time you took your hands to the left like this? Did you notice any differences? Did something surprise you about how different this side might feel for some of you than the other side? Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Next time you're coming back towards the center, just keep going and go towards the right. Get the full rotation, taking the hands left and right, lengthening the arms so the shoulder blade and the ribs peel off the floor. Let your head and your eyes just follow your hands. Breathing. Letting your arms rest whenever you feel fatigue. Good, good. And then all of you go ahead and let your arms rest. Knees together again, feet together, ankles together, and taking the knees now side to side. First rolling over the outer edge of one foot, lifting the pelvis, the low back, the ribs, placing each of those back down and rotating to the other side. And which way does your head want to roll? Does it want to roll in the same direction? Try that a few times, just letting your head roll in the same direction. And then a few times try letting your head roll in the opposite direction. Good, and then just let it all go. Just let it rest. Legs down. Final rest before our final movement, putting it all together. How often do we think about the backs of ourselves? Our eyes look out in front. We feel ourselves in front. We don't often have a sense of how the back of us is participating in movement. Often the only time I ever hear about other people's backs is when they're sore. But when you're just walking down the street not sore, do you ever kind of feel how the back of you is going along with the walking? I'm more interested in how the next window pane is going to show the front of you. So one last time, please bend your knees up. Bring your knees, your ankles, and your feet together. Bring your fingertips, fingers, palms of your hands together, and straighten your elbows out so your fingertips are pointing up to the ceiling. And gently, very gently, again, watching for any rotation that may cause strain, keeping your hands locked and your knees locked, begin taking your hands to the right and your knees to the left, feeling the different ribs that are peeling off the floor with this particular rotation. And then placing everything back down and going the other direction. Smoothly, effortlessly transitioning from side to side. As if something's just floating underneath you and just taking your body from side to side. Just floating on the water. And water's taking your knees one way and your hands the other way. Which way does your head want to go now? Does it follow your hands or does it follow your knees? Well, let your head follow your hands, but let your eyes follow your knees. And breathe. And then can you switch that? Can you let your head follow your knees and your eyes follow your hands? And feel your ribs. And feel your feet. And breathe. And have fun. And when your arms start to feel tired, just give everything a rest. Let it all go. I read a wonderful article that a Feldenkrais trainer had written, just a basic introductory article about the Feldenkrais method. And he talked about how when we think of our bodies, we often think about, our neck or our back. Maybe our feet are sore. And in the Feldenkrais method, it's about bringing all of you into consciousness, not necessarily that you think of everything at the same time, but when all of you is conscious to your nervous system, movement is distributed, support is distributed, effort is distributed throughout all of you, so certain parts don't keep working extra hard over and over again, resulting in strain and pain or weakness. So when you're ready, please roll to your sides, sit up, and then come to standing. Take a few moments or more to just feel the influence. What is different? How are you aware of yourself now? And linger there. Thank you.